Hello, I'm Jonasz Lewiński and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. A security conference is taking place in Latvia's capital, Riga, focusing on the many challenges that Western nations are facing today. And no doubt, high on the agenda is going to be the question of migration and Russia's war against Ukraine. So what are the conclusions so far, and what are the topics which are likely to be the main focus of this conference? Well, we're going to be talking about all this and more with our guest today, Martin Sklenár, former defense minister of Slovakia. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. Very happy to be on the show.
So let us begin with migration. There has been a development when it comes to the migration debate. Poland has recently announced that it might be suspending certain rights, including the rights to asylum, due to the crisis on its border with Belarus. The initial response was fairly skeptical, but now the European Union has said we stand in solidarity with Poland, with Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, but generally with the countries which are facing the same issues, such as Finland, such as the Baltic states. What do you think about this development? Do you think that this initial skepticism was simply a case of misunderstanding?
Well, I believe it is important to say that the current situation with migration is not a regular one that you would expect to have if people migrate or have to leave a specific region for the reasons of living in a war situation or something like that, or economic. This is a very much organized way of putting people into places where they can be seen or they can cause tensions and used as part of the hybrid influence that Russia, Belarus, and maybe also other countries are using to basically weaponize migration as a way of influence and a way of trying to pursue its own interests. So this is not a usual situation with migration as we are used to it from the past. And in this sense, we should also approach it in a way that that requires or that responds to the situation, making sure that we also apply non-standard or tools that we don't usually use. So this is a natural development, and I think the understanding is building up, and is actually the awareness is rising in the European Union and in the West about what is the character of this situation and how to approach it and how to deal with it. That's why we have seen maybe hesitations in the beginning, but then later, taking the approach on and working with it.
And a quick question on the same issue. Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has recently said that the existing legislative framework within international law pertaining to the right to political asylum has been created in slightly different times. He said that as a former beneficiary of these laws, that basically it used to be the case that for countries of the former communist bloc would not allow their own citizens to leave. So these laws existed to facilitate people escaping the clutches of these regimes to make a new life for themselves in the West. Now the dynamic has actually shifted, he said, and the countries from the same region, Belarus and Russia, which has been orchestrating that, are artificially pushing people into the West. Do you think that this means that we will have to think about a wide-scale reform of the existing laws in order to take into account this new reality in international law?
The most important thing will be to find the rules, find the ways how to manage the situation, because the interest, the push of people living in more difficult circumstances, looking for a better life for themselves, for their family. I mean, the push will be there. Migration will be happening anytime and all the time. So it makes sense to adapt the rules that we have created in the past to the new situation, as we are doing also in other areas, including defense and others. So it really is something to consider, and the important thing will be to keep the basic principles and values which have led us to create a system that protects people who are migrating due to the different reasons. And these values and principles should be safeguarded and should be preserved.
So now moving on to the war in Ukraine, and some news outlets and some commentators are saying that President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has achieved very little with his victory plan, that it was met with skepticism. Why do you think we're facing this sort of conclusion already, where the negotiations are still ongoing? Do you think that this plan really was underwhelming, or perhaps we are missing some sort of bigger scheme there, basically?
I'm not sure whether I would call it underwhelming. I mean, this is obviously the important thing is that President Zelensky came with a plan. He has a vision how to bring victory to Ukraine, and for that he needs strong support from his Western allies and partners. And obviously, I mean, it will take some time to digest in the West to see what it really means, how much of an effort there needs to be. The important thing is not only in his plan, but also here in Riga in the conference, there is a very strong message of support for Ukraine, and that the West should do exactly as President Zelensky has proposed it. Not only support Ukraine as long as it takes, but to do whatever it takes to bring Ukraine to victory. That's the expert opinion here in Riga, but also in other conferences around Europe. That's an important political change in the approach to supporting Ukraine, which should happen as soon as possible, without any concerns about escalation from the Russian side. We see that Russia is obviously planning their action regardless of whatever the West does in Ukraine. Brings in more people even coming from North Korea. Now we see soldiers nearing Ukraine, using their weapons for a long time. Support from China has been ongoing. So this doesn't really make sense on the Western side to keep limiting ourselves in the support to Ukraine and playing basically the Russian game where the war in Ukraine will continue in this way of attrition, playing basically into Vladimir Putin's hands, where he wants to have a long, ongoing conflict and bring Ukraine to a slow defeat.
And that is a compelling point. In fact, Latvia's Foreign Minister Baiba Bražė has emphasized this during the opening panel. How much do you think it is going to take to convince our partners in the West, though? Because it seems there is a consensus in the Balkans, in the Nordic countries, the Baltics, my bad. The Baltics, the Nordic countries, that this is really the case, that we cannot, run with self-imposed restrictions when it comes to helping Ukraine. And yet in the West, I mean, President Zelensky has asked a very simple question. Will you invite us into NATO? This was the first point of the plan. And yet we don't have a consensus there. And it seems like this invitation will not be forthcoming anytime soon. So what would need to happen to convince the West that more actions need to be taken on this front?
I think the situation is being well analyzed in the West. There's obviously political developments going on in many countries in the West, including the U.S. presidential and Congress election in a couple of weeks. So those are things that play into the decisions that Western countries make. But we see more and more voices saying that the West should be also supporting Ukraine or dealing with the situation in Ukraine from the position of its strength, not with concerns and limitations, but making sure that Russia understands that the West is very much stronger than Russia is, and can use the whole support for Ukraine to bring it to victory. And those voices include even some voices in Germany. The head of the Christian Democratic Union has stated that it would be probably a good idea to impose some kind of a limit or deadline for Vladimir Putin to stop the fighting. Otherwise, he will face consequences in terms of limiting or lifting the limitations that Western countries have imposed on the donated equipment in Ukraine. As I said, those
In a word,
must-
negotiations, of course, but from a position of strength and not a position of weakness. And this, once again, is a powerful message that hopefully will reach more leaders in the West as time goes by. Martin Sklenár was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I'm Jonasz Lewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us for more latest news and updates.